Morning, everybody. Welcome to the webinar today. Today's a special webinar that we've got for you. Before we get going on introductions, I just want to make sure that everything is working well, that we've got audio and visual going. For those who are in the attendee room, you should see a questions box. If you can type anything in there, good morning, hello, just to let me know that number one, you can hear me, number two, you can see a screen. That would be lovely. If I can get anyone to put anything in, great. Okay, I'm seeing some responses come in. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, you guys now also know how to ask questions during the webinar. So as we get rolling along, at any time, if you have a question, you can type it right into that questions box. Another way to ask questions is by raising your hand. You'll see a little hand icon. If you do that, I'll know that you would like your phone or audio unmuted, and you can ask your question directly. At that point, we'll kind of take pauses throughout for doing that, but at any time if a question comes up, you need clarification, anything at all, just please put it in the questions box. We'll moderate that as the whole session rolls on. Just to do a quick little background, number one, welcome to the webinar. We're really excited that you guys are all here for this special learning opportunity to learn more about the COMET Farm app and tools online, which is wonderful. I also just want to highlight to folks some of the upcoming trainings that CTD has. If you go to our website under training and training events, you can find the tab for webinars and web training. You can see the link to the most previous, where I'll show you where you can find the rest of those for our archives, today's registration, and some other ones. We've got one on creating a functional, accessible web presence coming up. We'll have part 2 of this COMET Farm special training on the animal ag demo. That will be coming up in a couple weeks, and cover crop ideas and so on. So lots of webinars. We have a new special webinar session that we're going to be launching in November, highlighting conservation district projects. So that also is coming up. Look for those soon. We also, if you want to look at previous webinars, you can go to training webinar archive and recordings and see all the ones that have recently been given over the last couple months. So a great way just to stay connected, to learn a few things and keep things going. So with that, I want to start our webinar for today and just say that this is a really unique opportunity that we've got with NRCS providing us the connection to host this webinar on the COMET Farm and Planner tools today. So NRCS worked with Colorado State University on a grant to create this tool and to host this tool. And today we have Haley Nagel from Colorado State University with us, who will be presenting one of the modules of this tool, the Cropland demo portion. And in the future, as you saw in a couple weeks, then she'll be highlighting the ag tool. So we've got some great things that she's going to be showing us here today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Hallie, and let you introduce yourself and the tool and get us going. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, Nicole, and thank you everyone for joining this COMET Farm and COMET Planner demonstration. Like she said, my name is Haley Nagel, and I am the Outreach and Education Specialist for the COMET Farm team here at CSU, and I work specifically in the research group led by Dr. Keith Kaustin. And I have a background in ecology, entomology, and a master's in education, which leads me to you guys here. So what I would like to start with is just a little introduction to the COMET Farm tools and a little background before I head into a cropland demonstration project. So today we're going to be looking specifically at the tools for conservation planning, and greenhouse gas mitigation in agriculture and forestry. Specifically looking at the Cropland module today for COMET Farm and COMET Planner, if time permits. And then next week, I will demonstrate the animal agriculture module, which we've recently updated and released new features as of September 2020. And I will also address any follow-up questions from this week's presentation. I would also like to point out that I am a new hire on the team. So I just joined the team in late summer. And so I will try to answer any questions that you guys have to the best of my ability. But if I cannot answer a question, we can hold on to those questions and I will ask the team. I'll go back to the Comet Farm team and ask to get you guys the answers that you, answers to your question. So let's get started. See if I can go. There we go. All right, so the Comet Farm teams, or the Comet tools, like Nicole mentioned, were developed in partnership with NRCS and the Climate Change Program Office at USDA. And so we want to thank them for their continued support and the use of the Comet tools. Additional support and funding comes from smaller state agencies and private donors, and the Comet Farm team is here on the left. So a brief history of the tool. IPCC developed the methods to start quantifying greenhouse gas emissions back in 1997. And then in 2012, the USDA Climate Change Office and NRCS took things beyond those IPCC methods and developed what we call the Blue Book, or the methods document that I'll show you in a few slides, that defines equations, methods, models that are used to quantify these agricultural emissions related to conservation methods within agriculture. Comet Farm was created in parallel and as a function of this Blue Book, which I will also put a link to the Blue Book in the chat when we get there. So who's using Comet tools? We have over 13,000 users who've created more than 24,000 projects in the past, I guess since the original VR tool was created in 2012. And so these include NRCS field offices, education, so graduate programs are using it at businesses, scientists, and NGOs. This as an introduction as who's using our tools. So both Comet Farm and Comet Planner can be accessed on these URLs, so comet-planner.com and comet-farm.com. Both are free to use for anyone who has an internet connection, and so they're free at the basic level. And both are web-based greenhouse gas inventory tools for land-based systems and are designed for conservation scenario analysis. And so we're going to dive deeper into the differences between these tools throughout this presentation. So Comet Farm is going to be a modeling platform that implements the USDA sanctioned methods and models. And Comet Planner, I guess I should go back on that one, sorry. Comet Planner was created later as a simpler tool for regional assessments in order to visualize the general benefit. And so we're going to go through the differences in a second. So introducing the greenhouse gas accounting. So when you focus on the top level of soil within the system, an increase in the organic matter by just 1% on 10 acres of loam soil type, this is the equivalent of about 900 metric tons of CO2. So to put that into context, it's about the equivalent of removing 190 passenger cars for a single year, or the emissions related to driving a car 2.2 million miles and removing emissions associated with 100,000 gallons of gasoline consumed, just by increasing the soil organic matter by 1%. So the greenhouse gases in agriculture, Amy Swan created this cartoon to demonstrate all of the fluxes between those sources and sinks of the greenhouse gases. So Comet tool was designed to do an entire greenhouse gas inventory within an entity with a focus on the three main greenhouse gases associated with agriculture: CO2, N2O, and CH4, methane. The infographic demonstrates the various sources and sinks of these gases. And for example, livestock, the cow down here is going to play a key role in releasing methane through direct emissions from livestock belches and decomposition of manure. Methane is also released from growing rice, which is no longer actually the rice accounting activity in Comet Farm is no longer available, but the animal agriculture is. And then sources of nitrous oxide, including the application of synthetic fertilizers and the manure decomposition, are also accounted for in Comet Farm. And then we have the main cycle of the carbon cycle through the soil system, either through sequestration or lost to the atmosphere. And so this diagram demonstrates a simplified version of all these elemental cycles within a farm. And each of these sources and subsource categories are identified in the common balance sheet that is expressed in CO2 equivalent, which is because these greenhouse gases have different global warming potentials. Comet Farm expresses the report out in CO2 equivalent. So we're going to revisit this cartoon at the end when I show you guys a Comet Farm report. So our calculation methods, as a modeling platform, the Comet Farm tools implement more than 40 different USDA sanctioned methods and models. It implements a set of computer models that simulate all of the greenhouse gas emissions that have been emitted within the defined entity. And you, as a user, would define the entity as a cropland, agriculture, or animal ag, forestry or agroforestry, or all of the above. So the methods are accounting from manure to fertilizer to burning to other management practices. So the soil-related emissions are calculated through the DASIN model, which is the principal model used in Comet Farm. The accounting for animal ag is also available in different livestock modules, not just cattle, have different empirical models associated with each of them, as well as the agroforestry and forestry systems. The data collected here is unique to each individual entity, and to make it as user-friendly as possible, we've collected, or we made it possible for the users to enter their data comprehensively once, and is used to drive all of the methods and models within Comet Farm. And so these are all defined in this Blue Book document. This is available to the public on Comet Farm's website, and at the end of this, when I switch over to the demonstration, I can put a link to this in the chat box for you guys. So we've heard talk about Comet Farm and Comet Planner, and what do they do? So these tools are built around a conservation scenario analysis. So Comet Farm gives the users the ability to input historical management practices, so what was done pre-2000, and baseline data. So the baseline data is what you are currently doing on your farm, your business as usual data. And then it superimposes potential conservation practices to compare the benefits relative to a baseline. And so in Comet Farm, you have the ability to enter your future management. So that would be your change in management scenario. And so Comet Farm and Comet Planner follow a very similar path. However, we're going to dive into the differences in a second here. So to compare, Comet Farm allows for a flexible field to farm specific accounting. Users with Comet Farm have the ability to set up management practices in an almost infinite number of ways to compare against the baseline on the same balance sheet. Depending on the complexity of your project, this could involve a heavier data entry compared to Comet Planner. And it can take a few minutes to generate your results. The more scenarios and the more plots you include, the longer it takes to calculate your results. Whereas Comet Planner, this tool was created later to be a faster, simpler tool to use for users with only 4 clicks to get to your results. It's a good introduction to determining the impacts of conservation scenario practices that you may be implementing. It also has a flexible baseline for what is typical, a fixed baseline. Comet Planner has a fixed baseline for what is typical farming practices within a given region. So Comet Planner provides meta-model results of Comet Farm model runs completed at a regional level. So these regional averages for Comet Planner are developed based on USDA's MLRAs, so the major land resource areas that are defined with common physio-geographic regions, common soils, weather, and topography, and they're about, I want to say 5 to 10 of those regions, depending on the size and location of your county. The conservation practices defined in Comet Planner are defined by NRCS and include practices that are specifically tied to soil greenhouse gas emissions, or those that have a soil carbon benefit or impact. I would like to point out that both Comet Farm and Comet Planner are not life cycle analysis tools, but they are just accounting for emissions within the boundary that you define. So that farm parcel that you've defined or the animal ag operation that you have. So it does not account for the upstream and downstream emissions. So does anyone have a question so far about Comet Farm versus Comet Planner before I dive a little bit more into Comet Farm?
Yeah, so folks, I'm not seeing any questions in here quite yet, Hallie, Haley, but if anyone does have questions, please put them in that questions box, or you can at this point raise your hand if you've got a question you just want to ask really quickly. So either way, put those in the questions box at this time. Okay, I'm seeing nothing coming in quite yet, so perhaps you can continue on.
Right.
If one pops up, I'll interrupt in.
All right, that sounds good. So the COMET tools are a nexus. As mentioned earlier, we have over 13,000 users, and these include federal and state level programs, private carbon markets like Nori that use Comet Farm's API service, and companies with supply chain initiatives like Ben & Jerry's. So it's a nexus for greenhouse gas emissions. And additionally, we've recently had a spike in carbon farm planners that have used the tools to facilitate a quick scenario analysis and assessment in the initial planning stages for carbon farm planning. All right, so I'm going to dive in a little bit more into Comet Farm now and the methods involved. So like I mentioned before, Comet Farm's principal model, methods and model for the cropland accounting activity is the DACENT model, which is outlined in the USDA Blue Book. And it runs simulations about how crops are grown and about how much nitrogen and carbon are going to cycle through the soil and ecosystem. So the model simulates, how crops are harvested, how the crop residue decomposes, and how carbon fluctuates between the sources and sinks as a result of the physical properties of the soil, the temperature, and the moisture. Information that drives these models comes from a data set that was developed by peer-reviewed studies from over 200 sites that date back over 170 years, and it's maintained by universities and private corporations. So if we look about the whole picture of how Comet Farm works, some of the common soil conservation practices that people are implementing through Comet Farm, they can lead to huge, large carbon benefits. For example, when you reduce the tillage or you add cover crops, these have cascading impacts on the emissions through reducing soil disturbance and maintaining the living roots in the soil. So users will provide a specific location and specific details on the management practices that have been used in the operation, the historical management practices, and then climate data and soil data from PRISM and Sergo respectively when you define your location are pulled. And this combined with the number of USDA sanctioned methods and models and the empirical models generate the output once they're run through the DACENT model and the CSU platform. This generates the outputs which are returned to the user and demonstrated in either a tabular, so a table report, or a graphical report that you can download. So when users first enter Comet Farm for the cropland, you will need to define your location first. And this is how you are generating your, how Comet Farm, the platform, pulls the data from PRISM and Sergo for climate and soil information. And so you enter your location and you define your parcel. So this is where Comet Farm's farm to field specific accounting comes into play, because you can make parcels as small as half an acre up to a few hundred acres. And so you can define your parcels. The yellow lines here on the map are going to demonstrate the various map units that are associated with the soil types. So you can actually click on those to define your soil texture type. So once you define your location, You are then prompted to enter your historic management data. So this is that before 2000, what was happening on your parcel of land. And then you are going to enter as a user a baseline. So this is your current business as usual management practices. So this is anything that is going to impact the soil, stimulating growth or soil disturbance. So you're going to include crop rotations, fertilizers, irrigation events, tillage events, and we have a relatively new feature, the drag and drop feature, which is demonstrated here on the slide. This allows users to create a crop rotation based off of some of the common crops in the area based on USDA's databases of fertilizer use. Oh, sorry, not that part. It is pulled on the crop rotations here are pulled from the USDA's database on the average crops in the area. So this is what the crops that are demonstrated here are not an exhaustive list, but just the common ones to help users create a quick crop rotation. The other features, so to minimize data entry for users, default values do populate for management events like fertilizer use and crop planting date, but users can modify those to fit the needs, change the date, change the yield as they see fit. So once the user has completed entering the baseline management data, you are then prompted to enter your future scenario. So your future scenario is the changes in management, and these are modeled 10 years after the baseline. So your baseline was defined, unless you modify it, which I will demonstrate, you're defined from 2000 to up until the year before the current year. And then your future scenario, which is shown on this slide, is modeled 10 years after the baseline period. So this is where if you were changing your tillage, you're modifying your irrigation types, this is the future management scenario would be where you would implement those into COMET Farm. So then the tool is going to execute the models and allows the users to see how your practices can impact the soil, carbon, nitrogen in their field. And so while different practices impact different greenhouse gas fluxes, the results in COMET Farm are tabulated in the metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And so the DASIN model, which again is the principal model used to estimate these changes in soil carbon and organic matter, allows the users to see this change. And if you recall back to, I think I can see it on the screen, if you recall back to the diagram in the top right, each category and subsource category on the results page is associated, each arrow that you see has a little tab on the report outs page. So you can see the source and subsource category. So for example, if you were to select the N2O, the nitrous oxide, you could see where the direct N2O emissions and the indirect N2O emissions were coming from. We also estimated, oops, where are we gonna go? There we go, sorry about that. A confidence interval is shown around the estimate. So using the Monte Carlo simulation method, the confidence interval portrayed here shows that there's a 90% likelihood that the result falls between the upper and lower bounds. So 5% chance it could be as low as the number on the left, and 5% that it could be as high as the number on the right. And so the Monte Carlo, so an uncertainty measure is the only one that does not have that is the soil carbon, because it is really difficult to measure the uncertainty for soil carbon. So this is available for the nitrous oxide and methane. So on a previous slide, I think it showed that COMET Farm has API accessibility. So the COMET Farm API allows for programmatic scripting access, kind of like a side door entrance for the COMET Farm modeling tool. And users using the API can perform more extensive regional cropland simulations to be run through the model, the COMET Farm model, using the DASIN methods and models. So it's run through Google Cloud, and the API utilizes XML input and output files. And if anyone's interested in that, I can show you where you can find some samples of those. And so use of the API is generally free for limited use. So if you're running less than 50 model runs a day, It is also free for USDA sponsored projects. But large scale analysis, so for those that are running corporate and commercial analysis, requires us to charge a small fee to run the API through the cloud. And that small fee includes a licensing fee and a small cost for us to run the model in that manner. So if you're interested in that, I can get you in contact with Brad Justice of Soilometrics, who is in charge of licensing that. Comet Farm user, if you go to comet-farm.com, that is 100% free for users. Just the API requires a small fee. So the API, like I said, utilizes an XML input and output files, and these will actually match what the users see on the graphical user interface. So they're utilizing the same platform, and the output files will match that as well. So between the API and the graphical user interface, which we call the GUI for short, both use, I'm sorry, I lost where I was. So both the user interface, so what you guys see when you go to comet-farm.com, and the API estimate emissions using those Comet Farm methods and models. But like I said, the API allows users to run really large scale analysis all at once. So carbon credit companies like Nori are using the Comet Farm API. The user interface allows for a quick scenario comparison on a farm level or even a small field level scale. And so the results for the GUI are presented in a tabular or graphical report, which I will demonstrate in a moment. But unfortunately, the API users are only able to view the report in an XML output file format. So I'm going to demonstrate Comet Planner real quick before I go into the Cropland comparison. Does anyone have any questions on API versus GUI or an introduction to Comet Farm?
Once again, just a reminder for folks, put any of those questions you have into the questions box and/or raise your hand at this time, and you can ask any questions that you've got so far.
Looks like I'm not seeing any questions yet, which is okay.
Yeah, nothing coming in. Oh, there you go. We've got one. For those of us that are not very techie, which one of these outputs would we be using? Is it the GUI? Question mark.
That would 100% be the GUI, yes. I am not well versed in the API XML input output files. That would be more people who are involved with coding. So the GUI is what most planners would be using. Great question.
Okay, thanks, Hallie. I think that's all the questions we've got so far.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so a quick demonstration of Comet Planner before I hop into the Cropland demo. And because Comet Planner is only 4 clicks to get your results, this should be quick. So Comet Planner, the idea behind this was to create a tool that was simpler, easier to use, and it demonstrates the relative benefits of those NRCS conservation practice standards that are given in a specific region against a baseline. So for Comet Planner, random cropland and grassland points were identified within each of the approximate 230 different agricultural regions, so those MLRAs, major land resource areas, that are defined by NRCS. And so crop rotations for each of those points were constructed from the USDA NASS Cropland data layer back in 2008 for every region of the country. And then additional survey data like typical practice dates, average inputs by state and by crop were added, thus becoming the fixed baseline for the modeling analysis. There we go. So then the fixed baseline when you enter your location is run through the Comet Farm API. So there we go. So it's run through the Comet Farm API, and then we superimpose the conservation practices that the user selects on top of that baseline, and then modeled both to give your estimate in the greenhouse gas reductions. And so these were modeled both using the COMET farm system, using soil, weather, historic management data for each point location. And so it's modeled similarly because it is using the COMET farm methods and models, and so it's just run through the COMET farm API. But if we go through how it's set up, actually this page first. So the difference in emissions is presented for COMET Planner in a tabular report that you can also download. And the numbers are going to be an average of all those different points within that ecoregion. So when you're selecting a county in COMET Planner, you're tying your county to the MLRA in that area. And so point level carbon stock and greenhouse gas emissions changes modeled in COMET Farm were averaged to the regions in this area to provide your regional estimates in COMET Planner. So when you're using COMET Planner, getting ahead of myself. So I guess in summary, COMET Planner is going to include 34 of those NRCS conservation practice standards, and those are tied directly to soil disturbance or greenhouse gas impact. So for planning purposes, additional supporting practices like fence building or other infrastructure practices would not be included in the COMET tools because those would not have a direct greenhouse gas benefit. So for COMET Planner, all the user has to do is you are inputting your project location and the project name, and then you select the class of conservation practice standards that you would like to address. So if you were addressing tillage change or modification, you would select cropland management. And then you select from a list of conservation practice standards, and you select the specific practice implementation. And then as soon as you select that, these populate a table down at the bottom in step 4, where you would then enter your acreage, and then COMET Farm reports on the fly instantly your CO2 equivalent reduction. For example, though, if you had any questions about, I don't know what this conservation practice standard means, when you select the conservation practice standard here, a little window will appear that gives you a one-page summary or the whole NRCS summary of that conservation practice standard. So your results for COMET Planner, when the user selects the conservation practice standard that they want to, that they want to superimpose and compare it to the baseline, these are run through the COMET Farm application, and these are representing averages based off of COMET Farm reports. And so similar to COMET Farm, these reports are given in CO2 equivalent, so greenhouse gas reductions in metric tons of CO2. But opposite of COMET Farm, a negative reduction in COMET Farm means that you've had an increase in emissions. Positive results here would indicate a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions or carbon sequestration. And so here's a little sample document of if you had a question about the conservation practice standard that was implemented in COMET Planner, a one-page summary would appear when you click on that. This COMET Planner report is also available to download, and each of those summaries is available in there as well. All right, so I'm going to hop over to the COMET Cropland demonstration if anyone has any questions before I head over there.
We've got a question here for you. Can you please go through the negative explanation again?
Yes. Let's see. So in COMET Planner, your report is given in metric tons of CO2 equivalent, which is the same as COMET Farm. However, different from COMET Farm, COMET Planner's positive results, so if you had implemented cover crops, legume cover crops here, and it said your emissions were 1 metric tons of soil carbon, then that would, a positive result indicates a greenhouse gas reduction. Whereas on Comet Farm, a positive result would indicate a increase in emissions. And the reason why they're different is because Comet Planner is working off of a fixed baseline from those major land resource areas. And so what you're getting is the report out is a change in emissions from that fixed baseline to your conservation practice scenario that you decided to implement, which in this case is the legume cover crops. It may make a little bit more sense when I show you the Comet Farm report out after the Cropland demo. I'm going to head over to that. We can have a follow-up on that question once we go through the Cropland, so you can see an actual Comet Farm report. All right, so I'm on the Comet Farm website, so comet-farm.com. And when you enter the Comet Farm site, you are going to be welcomed by a little pop-up box. And the pop-up box just describes any new updates that are the most recent updates that have been implemented into Comet Farm. So most recently, we have added a new multi-year livestock modeling, and now you can do herd level reporting. We've also updated some of the background entity framework, and Comet Farm now has the capacity to run in Hawaii, but it uses a different method set. So I'm going to close out of here. Before we get started, I would like to draw your attention to this little help desk widget in the bottom right corner. This is added this summer, and so this will follow you on any page of your Comet Farm journey. It is not currently on Comet Planner, but it should be on there soon. And I have populated this help desk widget with over 50 different solution articles to commonly asked questions. So if you were to type, what do I need? What information do I need? That might be here. If for some reason you can't find the answer to your question, you can contact us directly through here and I'll get back to you. And then another tool to point out is I am on the home page right now. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you have this USDA Blue Book. So when you click on that Blue Book document, it'll take you right to the 600-page Blue Book document methods and modeling document for Comet Farm. There's also, you can access Comet Planner directly through here, or you can do it through the URL. And there is a Comet Energy tool, which maybe if we have time, I can show you guys that as well. So I'm going to show you guys how to create a project. So if you do not have a Comet Farm account, I would recommend getting one before using it. Even though you can access all of the functions and features of the Comet Farm tool without creating an account, if you do not have an account, you cannot return to any project and no project will be saved for you. So if you happen to not have an account and you accidentally navigate away from that window, you will no longer have access to that project. So creating an account, super simple, 2 steps to create an account. So I would recommend doing that before proceeding. So I have headed to the tool page, and I'm going to walk you guys through the Cropland demo project, which you also have access to. So any of the demo projects are pre-populated with data. So all you have to do is move through the pages so you get to understand the motions of Comet Farm. So to do that, I'm going to select Create Demo Project. And out of my options, I'm already selected as Cropland, but you could do dairy, beef, agroforestry, or forestry if you'd like. I'm going to select Create. And if you have more than one project, as I do, you can see all the projects on the left-hand pane. And I am highlighted as Cropland Demo Project, and I'm selecting my accounting activity. Because this is the demo project, it's already selected for me. If you were creating your own project, you could go in and select as many accounting activities as you'd like, or as little as you'd like. If you have a question at any point and there's a little blue question mark next to you, that means someone else probably also had a question. So we have populated some help tools throughout the platform to help you move along. So I'm going to define my activities. Your first task is to define your location. So if you were creating a new project, you would see a world map that would be totally zoomed out, and you would enter a zip code or an address to find your location. This is a demo project, so it's already in here. And this is actually the Alley Demonstration Farm, owned and operated by Iowa State University. And our parcel is already defined here, but if you wanted to add a parcel of your own, you could select add parcel by polygon, by point, by circle, or if you have an S3 shapefile, you could upload that directly through here. So if you wanted to add a polygon, you could just make your polygon, and it'll define it by how many acres it has. I'm not going to add any more for the demonstration project. Another cool feature here is, like I showed you on the introduction page, if you select soils up at the top and then select view soil by click, if you click anywhere on the map, it will define your soil texture using the Web Soil Survey data here. So I am done defining my parcels, but you could define as, I'm actually not sure what the limit on number of parcels is. I've seen people add up to 90 parcels. Just depends on what you're looking for. So I'm selecting done defining parcels. This little window will only appear on a demonstration project, just to let you know more background around here, around the demonstration project. So on the historic management practice, this page is going to be for any management practices that have been implemented pre-2000. So irrigation, whether or not it was enrolled in the CRP, and what kind of crops were in rotation, and the type of tillage here. So again, these are all implemented because this is the demonstration project. But for example, so your baseline period, like I mentioned before, it is automatically defined as the year 2000 to the year before the current year, so 2019 here. If, for example, you would like to account for a change that you made back in 2015, you could modify this baseline, and I'm just going to show you for this. You could modify the baseline to when you wanted it to end. So if you made that practice change back in 2015, you could modify your baseline to end there. We're going to leave our baseline here for the demonstration project. So I'm going to select next. So on your baseline management page, this is going to be where you input anything that has an impact on soil. Nicole, can you tell me, is this zoomed in? Can you guys see this okay? Maybe if I zoom this in a little bit more.
That looks great,
okay.
Actually. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So on the baseline management page, this is going to be where you are inputting any sort of management practices that have had a direct impact on plant productivity or a soil impact. So we've got our crop date, planting date, tillage, soil amendments, liming, and burning. So if you are not using a Cropland demo project and you're creating your own project, this would appear blank at first. So we have a corn soybean rotation that was implemented here, and we use this drag and drop crop rotation feature to show that. Oh, no, now I'm really zoomed in. Okay, so with that, you can drag a crop that you'd like over here and then drag another one, and you can modify the irrigation and the tillage if you'd like. If you can modify it here, there's also an additional page. And so when I enter something like corn soybean, this is going to populate the rest of my baseline. I'm not going to do it in here because it's already populated, but it's going to populate the rest of the baseline just like it is here. So if I had 3 crops in the drag and drop rotation, so if I added grass in here as well, this would go 1 year corn, next year soybean, next year grass, and then complete the rotation for the rest of your baseline years. So I'm going to delete these guys for the demonstration project. If you do not find your crops in the drag and drop rotation, you can also search from over 80 different crops that we have here. So we've got the annual crop list here, and then we've got a seasonal cover crop. I'm going to continue. Seasonal cover crops, and then orchard and vineyard crops. But for this, we are just using corn. Again, when you select a planting date or when you select a crop here, Comet Farm is going to automatically populate with a default planting date, which is pulled from the averages of the region. but you can go ahead and modify these how you see fit. If you do not see your crop here, while there are over 80 different crops that are modeled here, some crops are not available for just not available in terms of limited data or the cost that it takes to add a new crop to Comet Farm. But some crops do have a surrogate, so they are modeled similarly. So for example, if you are looking for triticale, that is not in Comet Farm, but winter wheat models the same, so you could use that as a surrogate. So once you have your crop rotation set, your tillage or your planting and harvest date set, you can add a grazing event. If you add a grazing event here, Comet Farm will prompt you that you need to add the animal agriculture module as well. But we do not have a grazing event here. So I'm going to select next, and we will be on the tillage page. If you want to add a new tillage event, you can select add new tillage event. You can modify the tillage type by double clicking on that and on the box and scroll down to find your best fit tillage. You can also modify the date applied. And again, if you are struggling to figure out what kind of how Comet Farm defines tillage versus how your operation does, the little blue question mark will allow you to determine or break down the different tillage methods and implements used. I'm going to exit out of that. Instead of navigating through this next button at the bottom, you also can navigate through this bar at the top. So I'm going to click on fertilizer. And our corn here was fertilized with anhydrous ammonia. If you wanted to add a new fertilizer event, you could select add. And again, you could look for your fertilizer type here. The values over, that's not letting me exit. There we go. The values for total fertilizer applied, total N applied, these are also populated with default values, but you can modify those if you have lab reports. Manure and compost, they have their own tab. So you will not find any manure or compost in the fertilizer application. You need to go to this pane. Irrigation events. For this tool, types of irrigation are not modeled differently. The only thing that is modeled is date applied and the inches per application. We have liming and burning, which in this demo project, we have none. So once you reach to the last tab, if you notice, the year 2000 is highlighted in black. That means that we have entered all of the data for the year 2000 for our crop rotation. So when you scroll down though, I'm going to select next. You're given the opportunity to add an additional crop for a maximum of 3 crops a year. If you're adding an additional crop, or like a cover crop, you just need to ensure that the planting date and the harvest date for each of those does not overlap. We are not going to add a crop and additional crops for our baseline here, but I will demonstrate the, if I can zoom out just a little bit. Nope, can't zoom out. So this is the copy function. So for example, to minimize data entry, we created this copy function that allows you to copy the management practices from the year that you're currently working on, which is noted by this green check mark, to other years. So this says that already has data in here because this is a demonstration project, but if you were working off of a new project, these would not have any red boxes surrounding them, which would mean that they did not have any data. So if you wanted to copy all of your management practices from 2000 all the way on to the rest of your baseline, you could do that. You could do additional years or different years. And if you had more than one parcel, you could also copy this management practice to other parcels in different years as well. But because we only have one parcel here, you can only see one line. So all of our data has been entered for the Cropland project, so I'm going to select no thanks. And we are going to be prompted to move to the future management scenario, or we can keep editing. We are going to move to the future management. So the only management change for the demonstration project is we are switching from intensive till to no-till. And so your scenario management panes are going to look identical to the baseline management pane. The only difference here is if you notice the years. Our years are modeled 10 years after the end of the baseline. So Our baseline period ended in 2018, so our future is from 2019 to 2028. If you are creating a new project, you would be prompted to, you can either copy all of your management from the baseline over to the scenario. That way you can go in and make a small change. You could be prompted, or you would be prompted, your other choice is to select from default values of adding a cover crop or reducing tillage. If you'd like to just, it would copy your baseline and then change the tillage, or you can start from scratch and do your drag and drop rotation again. The data entry for the future management scenario is the exact same way as the baseline management. Here you are just making your management change. So our only management change was on the tillage implementations, and we have no till now. So I can navigate through all of these. You can navigate through all of them. There's also the option of the skip ahead at the bottom. I'm going to select next. And I'm not going to add an additional crop, but you could if you wanted to for up to 3 crops. So I'm going to select no thanks. And again, you're given the copy function. So I could copy all of this management data from 2019 to any other year that I wanted here. Mine all has data on here, so I'm going to select no thanks. When you select no thanks, you are prompted to either go to the report, you can continue editing the baseline or future management scenario that you're on right now, or you can create a new scenario. And so COMET Farm allows you to create up to 10 different scenarios. So perhaps you wanted to compare in your baseline, you had intensive till. In one future management scenario, you wanted to see reduced till. In another scenario, you wanted to see no till. So up to 10 scenarios. But keep in mind, the more complicated your report or the more complicated your project in terms of number of parcels and number of scenarios, the longer it will take to get your report. So my report should take, I'm going to say 30 seconds, which would be a great time for some questions if you guys had any. And if this doesn't load, I have a backup on the slides that will show you the breakdown of the report. So if you guys have any questions on the COMET Farm Cropland demo, and I'll get back to the reports questions once this loads.
We do have a question here. For mixed crop production, do you assign each field as an individual parcel and then add them into a bigger map or report for the whole farm area under management? Question.
When you say mixed crop, would you be talking about like intercropping, or if you did a grass legume mix? Because there would be 2 ways to do that. I just would like to clarify first.
Yes, hopefully, Tao, you can get that into the question for mixed crop, if that's, you know, kind of corn, rice, or rotation. He said like a farm with multiple crops at once, a CSA, etc.
Okay, so I think I understand the question correct. If there are multiple crops on a farm or on the whole operation, then you would want to define those as different parcels. If, for example, we had an operation that was intercropping grass legume mix and corn, and so how we did that was we set it up into 2 separate parcels that were total equivalent of all of the whole operation acreage, but we split it in half, and so half was just the grass legume mix and half was the corn crop. That way that you get the total acreage for both of the crops together, but they would be modeled separately.
I think another piece of this too is if you're working, let's say, with a smaller scale, or someone who on, let's say, an acre, 5 acre, they've got strips. So you've got a strip of peas, a strip of carrots, a strip of spinach, and so on. How would you handle that in here?
So if you had, so say you had a 30-acre field and you had 3 crops that were mixed the entire in that 30 acres, then we would suggest that you create a 10-acre parcel for one crop, a 10-acre parcel for the other crop, and a 10-acre parcel for the last crop within that 30-acre region.
Okay, and you would just keep scaling that down. So even if it's just a 1 acre parcel or a 5 acre and you've got 4 or 5 or more crops in strips, you still would break it down a strip per crop, no matter the scale.
Yes. And I'll have to check on how small of an acreage that you can define. I've gone down to 0.1 acres on Comet Farm.
Okay.
So it could be possible, yeah.
Okay, a similar question that we had here. Someone was asking about having buffers on a farm property. Do you have to create a separate polygon for those as well? A buffer being like a non-cropped area.
Great question, yes. So for example, if you had a cropland, 100-acre cropland that was corn soybean rotation, and then you turned, like, your management change was creating a buffer out of 5 of those acres, you would create 2 separate parcels, one being 95 acres and the other one being the 5 acres that would turn into the buffer strip. You would model them, you would have the same baseline for both. So if you were turning your cropland into the buffer strip, so they would both have the same baseline of the corn soybean rotation. And then for your future scenario, you would just turn the buffer strip into a grass. Like, the crop would no longer be corn soybean, it would be just a grass or a grass legume mix or alfalfa. We also, which this might be a great time to mention, that Adam Chambers of NRCS had prompted me this morning to mention this to you guys. We are creating a carbon farm planning curriculum, which I can send out as well, that also provides a Comet Farm tutorial breakdown of how to do more complex planning within Comet Farm. And I actually have some videos, which I can put in the chat, some YouTube videos that could help with creating parcels of land for buffer strips, filter strips, windbreaks, and hedgerows. So I can put those videos in the chat as well.
Great, and just so folks know too, we will post all of those links and videos and resources that she just mentioned up on the CTD website as well, with the recording of this webinar. So just FYI, if you don't capture them through the questions box, they will be posted on the CTD website as well. Okay, if you have any other questions at this time, please put them in. Otherwise, I'm not seeing any more questions at this moment. Maybe you can move on with what you've got there, Hallie.
All righty. So we're going to go back to the report out question. So this is the report for Comet Farm. This is the tabular report. If I had more than one parcel of land here, you would see another line here, but because I only have that one parcel, we can only see one here. And it is titled what the default was, which is F1. I would recommend a short and sweet but descriptive title for you when you're planning, because it can get a little bit confusing at the end if you have not titled them specifically to what's happening in the parcel. But anyways, the Comet Farm report out breaks it down by those source and subsource categories. It doesn't have, we're working on getting a little accordion button on here to show users that you can in fact click on this. So when you double click on each source category, the subsource category will appear with the corresponding emissions related to it. Anything that has a little calculator button next to it will demonstrate the equations, the empirical equations that were involved in calculating these emissions. And so these are all 0 because we didn't add any of these factors here. We also don't have anything for carbon monoxide because we did not burn anything for this project. We have, if you extend the nitrous oxide, there were no changes in nitrous oxide emissions here because we didn't change any of our fertilizer events, so those all stayed the same. And we've got methane here. So to address the question that was asked earlier, Comet Farm report is going to give you, so we have our baseline emissions here is always the first column, and these are our metric tons of CO2 equivalent related to the baseline. The next column is going to be your first scenario. So we have negative 14 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, which means that 14 metric tons of CO2 equivalent were in CO2 emission reduction. Sorry. So then our last column here, the one that's going to be either green or red, is going to indicate your change. So your baseline Comet Farm models, if you had continued those practices, if our baseline was from 2000 to 2018, if you'd continued those for an additional 10 years, so the same as the future management time period, this 24.9 would be your emissions for that. If you had changed to no-till, this negative 14 is your emissions in that 10-year future period. And so this green value over on the right-hand side, this is your change. If it was positive, it would be red. And so a negative value in Comet Farm indicates a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions or an increase in carbon sequestration. If this value was positive, like this value on the baseline, that would mean an increase in emissions. And so this report is your average annual emissions over a 10-year period. So the other part of this is that you can also view this in a graphical report by parcel. And so when you hover over this, it'll show you your emissions related to it. Actually, this is not what it was supposed to look like. There might be a bug. This is supposed to also show you your soil carbon, which I've never seen it actually look like this. So I think there's a bug. Sorry about that. Yeah, I can show you what this would actually look like. There we go. So your graphical report is going to look like what it looks like on here. So I'm going to put in a ticket for that. So thank you for your patience on that one. So on here, when you hover over the bar, the graph bar, you would see the emissions that correspond to this. And so this just compares the baseline to each scenario. So if you had more than one scenario, you would see a long list of the different scenarios to the right of this. But the graph is only compared by one parcel at a time. These are available for you to download though, when you select, this way. When you select exporting, where'd it go? Exporting your crop management data. So you can also export your crop management data as an Excel file, and it'll break it down by year if you are interested in seeing that. There's also the available soil water holding capacity for each of these based off of your future scenario. I think that is it for this. Another, I guess, last thing I would show you guys, if I open this tab, this greenhouse gas equivalencies tab down at the bottom right, it's a calculator that links you to EPA's equivalencies calculator. So you can actually scroll down. If you go to we have emissions data because that is what Comet Farm provides. And I believe it was 38.9 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. If we select calculate, EPA will provide you with equivalencies of those. Sometimes when you see the number as 38 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, it's just kind of an arbitrary number. So this allows you to kind of put it into some context and give that number some meaning. All right. Any questions about Comet Farm?
Okay, just questions into the question box at this time. You can also raise your hand if you've got a question and you think it'd be easier just to ask directly. Feel free to raise your hand and I can unmute your speaker or your microphone as well. Okay, I'm not seeing anything come in quite yet, Haley. People might be entering their comments, questions.
Alrighty, well, so while we're waiting for those to come in, I can give a quick demonstration of the same exact project on COMET Planner. So we can see the difference between those. Let's see. So COMET Planner also provides a little pop-up window of the new updates. So the biggest update for COMET Planner recently is the data download availability. So users are able to download all of the data that was used to pull your regional assessment using COMET Planner. A major difference with COMET Planner is that you do not need an account, nor can you create an account using COMET Planner. So this is just, it's not, and it would not be associated with your COMET Farm account either. So you just do the quick 4 steps to get your report. So our first step would be enter a project name. So we're going to do the same one. This one is in Iowa. So we're going to enter our state. And again, we're entering our state and county to tie our project to the major, wrong county, to tie our project to the major land resource areas that our project is associated with. And again, our project, the only thing that they changed was the intensive till to no-till for the 60-acre plot. If we wanted to look for, like, maybe someone was imposing prescribed grazing, or they were adding compost, maybe they were adding a windbreak or shelter break, those are available here. But we are going to change our tillage, which is in Cropland, and we are going to select that from residue and tillage management from no-till. And we are going to go from intensive till, intensive till to no-till. And this was non-irrigated land. So you're going to select the little plus mark. And when you scroll down, we're going to enter the acreage that was involved. So that was only 60 acres, and we have on-the-fly reporting. And so COMET Planner equates 42 metric tons of CO2 equivalent for this, for the same project as the COMET Farm one. The major differences come from that the COMET Farm was field specific, so we created that specific parcel of land. Again, COMET Planner builds on the major land resource areas and the data pulled from those, so regional averages for crop rotations, planting dates, harvest dates. So that is why the numbers are a little different, but relatively close. So COMET Planner is a good starting tool for your conservation scenario analysis for a quick comparison. You can also, if you were to, it is on the fly calculator. So if we started increasing the acreage of this, our values would automatically calculate in association with the different acreage here. You can also, when you scroll down here, you can see when you select show detailed emissions report down here in the bottom left, when you click on that, the little pop-up window will let you know the reduction coefficient associated with that practice here, based off of the different source and subsource categories. I would like to point out, because you had mentioned smaller parcels of land, if, for example, you have a parcel of land in here, maybe it's only 1 acre, or maybe it's only half an acre. So just because you have a smaller plot of land does not mean that there is not a greenhouse gas benefit associated with that. COMET Planner is only providing, it has a minimum value of showing you only 1. So if you were to add additional practices in here that had a greater greenhouse gas benefit, reductions benefit, then this smaller fraction value would be calculated in your total. If for planning purposes, because I've had some carbon farm planners who are working off a small acreage like this, you can calculate it using your, you can calculate the smaller reduction by using those coefficients here and multiplying by your acreage. Just a little bit of algebra for the smaller plots.
There is a question here for you, I think that makes sense here for this one. It says, since no account is needed for COMET Planner, I imagine that this does not save projects.
That is correct.
Okay, it's just more of a quick way to quantify changes rather than create a more complex project you'll come back to.
Correct. So you can't create an account, you can't save projects, but what we can do is you can download, I'm going to put back the original one, you can download your COMET Planner results here. So when I select download, there it is, you will get the option to download and print this, which if you have this on file, then you could easily go back in and recreate your COMET Planner, project, because it is only 4 clicks to get your results. A problem with that, with also not saving, is that if I was to navigate back on here and then go back forward, my project would no longer be here. So I have unfortunately input like 20 different practices here and accidentally navigated away and then had to do it all again. But I did have a report that I was working off of. Another benefit of downloading this report for planners is that the date created is time-stamped on here. So because COMET Planner undergoes routine, actually COMET Planner and COMET Farm undergoes routine updates to the data set and emission factors, that some of these values could fluctuate a little bit depending on which version that you're using. So it is important to have that timestamp of, oh, okay, I did this on October 13th. So maybe there was a new update that changed the emission factors just slightly.
Okay, another question for you. This goes back a little bit to the COMET form. When you were talking about the till and no-till, that they showed no significant difference in CO2. Was this just a model problem in the output? Would there be a combined CI by practice implementation?
Yes. So what we found that there's a bug right now, because there is, so with this particular project, they switched from intensive till to no-till. And so we do see a change in emissions of 38.9 metric tons in the tabular report. And I am unsure as to why that is not appearing in this graphical report. That is a software system bug that we just found. This graph should look like this graph here. And I'm sorry, can you repeat the last part of that question one more time?
It says, would there be a combined CI by practice implementation? I'm not sure what CI is. Maybe, Alan, you can put in a definition of what you're talking about. A confidence interval. So would there be a combined confidence interval by practice implementation?
That is a great question. Unfortunately, there is not. There is only a confidence interval provided for, what are they on here? Nitrous oxide, methane, and, nitrous oxide, methane, and I'm not sure if carbon monoxide is or not. Yeah, so there is no, it's not defined by practice standard. It's only defined by source and subsource categories for nitrous oxide and methane.
Okay, just a reminder for folks, any questions that you've got, anything that you would like Haley to show on either of these tools, any clarifications that you'd like, please put your questions into the questions box and or raise your hand. You can ask them direct if you'd prefer. Okay, I'm seeing nothing else come in quite yet. I'll give folks a minute just to type up those questions.
All right. Well, in the meantime, Adam from NRCS did want me to throw out a little bit more details on the carbon farm planning curriculum, if we had a few minutes to do that as well.
Yes, please. That'd be great. I know people would be interested in that.
Awesome. So a project, as soon as I came onto the Comet Farm team this summer, was working to create a carbon farm planning curriculum in partnership with Carbon Cycle Institute in Southern California, who were pioneers in creating the framework for carbon farm planning. And so our goal was to, underneath the leadership of NRCS, was to work with CCI and to create this curriculum to provide necessary background, tutorials on tools, and basic assistance for conservation planners, technical assistance providers to help them and producers create these carbon farm plans. So we have divided our curriculum into 3 modules. It is, right now it is online. It's not out in the public quite yet, and we're still waiting for the go-ahead to release that, but we would just like to let you guys know that this is coming. And so in our first module, we've got an introduction to the carbon farm planning process and a background on the essential, the essential foundation for why we should be carbon farm planning. And these include the principles of healthy soils, how carbon plays a role in soil health, agriculture, climate change mitigation. And so this module really dives into how you can turn the planning process into a carbon farm planning process. So it's based off of the framework of the NRCS conservation planning framework, those 3 steps. And it's planning, conservation planning through a carbon lens. So you're looking at ways to approach the operation to maximize the amount of carbon sequestered in any way possible, from reducing your tillage to adding windbreaks and hedgerows and buffer strips, like you all mentioned. So module 2 gets into the actual planning through the carbon lens, provides steps on how to read the landscape. So when you look at a landscape, how can we see that this specific area of the operation, oh, that would be a great place for a windbreak, or that's a great place for forage and biomass planting. And module 2 dives into that, and it also looks at tools for planning, so mapping tools and then common tools, which would be us, and works with how to use web soil survey, and then existing case studies. So these are carbon farm plans that Carbon Cycle Institute worked to create. Right now, it is regionally specific to California because that's where Carbon Cycle Institute works. But as this curriculum develops, we would like to include different plans for different systems in different regions. We would also like to provide an NRCS guide to those conservation practice standards. So a regional guide on how producers and TSPs interpret those conservation practice standards, because a buffer strip in one area might not be the same as a buffer strip in Iowa. So we're hoping to add that in there as this curriculum gets off the ground running. And then module 3 dives into actually developing a carbon farm plan. So CCI has created a framework, like an outline, a very hefty outline, which guides users through the actual carbon farm planning process. And I've populated it with the tables. So all people have to do is to include those tables in their plan. They would just have to go through the curriculum, and it walks them through the steps of that. And so there's some assessments and like interactive features of the curriculum that allows users to check their own knowledge as they go through it. So I'm thinking this might be available in November. We have a meeting later this week to determine where we go next with this, but NRCS would like to provide you guys with an introduction.
Awesome. That looks really great. I think that'll be very, very helpful for folks. Any questions at this point? Questions about that curriculum for Haley? Okay, I'm seeing no further questions, no hands raised. Anything you'd like to finish with here, Haley? I'll let you share your last little bits here.
Yeah, I guess the last thing that I would like to point out again, so if any of you guys are interested before our next call, it's on my calendar. I'm not sure if it's next Tuesday or the week after that. If I zoom out of here, I can show you guys. But if any of you guys were going to attempt a demonstration project, all you have to do is select this Create Demo Project. If you have any questions while you're going through that, again, this Need Help widget will follow you on any Comet Farm page, and you can contact us directly through here, or you can ask a question at our next meeting. And I will send over Nicole some links to some additional help desk tools that we have created in the meantime. But we wanted to thank you guys so much for letting us give this demonstration.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today and providing all this wonderful information to folks. And I know I'm going to go and explore the tool a little bit more. And just as a reminder for folks that next week we will have part 2 of this. If you go to the CTD website under our webinars and training, you will find the Comet Farm Cropland follow-up for the animal ag demo. So you'll find that info. You can register for that. That will be next Tuesday, the 20th, same time, same place. And links to both the slides that were presented, the tool, and some other information. I'll be sure to post additional links that were mentioned today so that you guys can follow up, maybe take it for a test drive between now and next week, and come with additional questions that you may have for Haley. So thank you again, Haley, for your time today, for your expertise, for your willingness to work on this, for NRCS and CSU for developing this tool. And hopefully we'll be able to use it a lot more these days as we work forward towards more carbon planning with our farms and our landscape in Washington State. So thank you so much for your time today. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, and thank you to all of our audience who joined us today. We look forward to seeing you next week for additional webinars. Everyone take care out there, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.